for the Second Chance Act Technology-Based Career Training Program for incarcerated adults and juveniles administered by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. My name is Roneen Davis, and I am a Grantee Technical Assistance Manager at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, which provides training and technical assistance to all grantees funded under the Second Chance Act. I oversee technical assistance provided to all Second Chance Act adult mentoring, young fatherhood mentoring, families and children of incarcerated parents, and technology-based career training grants. Joining us today is Darla Wolf, a policy advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance at the U.S. Department of Justice. We are very grateful to have Darla here today, joining us today to talk about this grant program. Before we begin, I have a couple of technical notes. If you encounter connection or audio problems during this webinar, please call WebEx Technical Support at 1-866-229-3239. Again, that's 1-866-229-3239. We'll also put that number up on the chat box on your screen. Unfortunately, there will be some connection issues that we may not be able to resolve during the webinar. However, we are recording today's webinar and it will be posted on our website. Everyone who registered for the webinar will receive an email as soon as the webinar is available on our website. You may also check the website directly at csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. At the end of today's webinar, we will have a few minutes for questions and answers from the audience. To ask a question, please enter it in the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can ask questions at any point during the webinar, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible before we end at 3 p.m. Eastern Time today. To get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the Justice Center. The Justice Center is a national nonprofit organization that serves policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels from all branches of government. Staff provides practical, nonpartisan advice and evidence-based, consensus-driven strategies to increase public safety and strengthen communities. We are constantly adding new content and resources to our website, and we send out a monthly newsletter that provides information about the latest research, funding opportunities, distance learning events, and other news about reentry. We encourage everyone who hasn't done so already to sign up for the newsletter by going to csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe. You can also follow us on our Twitter account at CSGJC. I would like to share a little bit of background on the Second Chance Act for those of you that are not familiar with it. Passed in 2008, the Second Chance Act authorizes a variety of federal grant programs that support state and local governments, tribal entities, and nonprofit organizations in providing evidence-based services intended to reduce recidivism. Technical assistance for Second Chance Act grants is provided by the National Reentry Resource Center, or NRRC, which is funded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and managed by us here at the Justice Center. The NRRC provides support to SCA grantees and the broader reentry field. In fiscal year 2016, $68 million were appropriated for Second Chance Act grant programs. These dollars are distributed between adult and juvenile programs and across all different grant tracks. There are currently 4 open solicitations that have been released by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Today, we will only be talking about the Tech Career Training Reentry Grant Program. You can see the other open solicitations on this slide. Please visit ojp.gov/funding for additional information on these other opportunities. If you would like to receive the most up-to-date announcements anytime new solicitations are released, please sign up for the newsletter I mentioned before by going to csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe. The Second Chance Act began funding technology-based career training programs in 2010. I apologize, but it says mentoring on the slide, but that's supposed to say technology-based career training. Since then, over $22 million have been spent on these vocational reentry programs. You can see on this slide the diversity of the agencies that have received this grant. These agencies include state, county, and city governments, colleges and universities, school districts, state corrections departments, as well as local jails and sheriff's offices, workforce and labor departments and agencies, and even the state commerce department. Since 2010, 37 SCA tech-based career training programs have been awarded to about 34 different agencies and departments. Here you can see that awards have been made across the country to 21 different states and the District of Columbia. If you'd like to find a Second Chance Act initiative near you, please visit the website listed at the top of this slide to see a map of all Second Chance Act grants in the country. This grant is designed to fund programs that will increase the employability of those returning from incarceration in technology-based jobs. Technology-based encompasses many different fields and types of training. Here are examples presented in the grant solicitation, as well as some examples of past programs. Keep in mind that technology can range from working on computers to learning to repair heavy machinery. Now, I'll turn it over to Darla to speak about the Bureau of Justice Assistance and additional information on the goals of the grant and details of what is expected in the application.
Thank you, Ronin. The Bureau of Justice Assistance has supported reentry programs through the Second Chance Act across the country. BJA provides leadership and guidance for criminal justice programs and the development of criminal justice policy. You can find the grant solicitation at the website listed on this slide. Please note that this webinar is a summary of the requirements, and all applicants should review the full solicitation before applying. The deadline for application is April 12th, and the award is available to states, units of local government, territories, and federally recognized Indian tribes. As noted before, educational institutions are eligible if they are considered a unit of local government. BJA is currently planning to make up to 5 awards of no more than $750,000 each, though this is subject to change. The award period for each grant will be 36 months. The goal of this program is to increase the employability of the incarcerated population so they are better suited to take on technology-based jobs. The objective is to provide career training prior to release from prison, jail, or a juvenile facility with connections and follow-up services post-release. All applications must demonstrate a partnership with a technology-based training entity that can provide the training inside the identified facility, whether directly or through training project staff. The training must be technology-related and in fields where there is a labor demand in or around the geographic areas to which the target population will be returning. All participants for the proposed program must be medium to high risk as identified using an empirically validated risk assessment tool. Applicants must describe the total number of people they plan to serve over the 36-month projected period and provide data to demonstrate that this is a number is reasonable. For programs currently operating, they need to state how many people that meet the stated target population characteristics that have been served in the last 6 months. For new programs, you need to state how many people met those characteristics within the last 6 months in the facilities where the proposed program will take place. Ensure that all program participants are receiving individualized reentry plans and case management support that link them to the services in the community post-release. You also need to provide a baseline recidivism rate for the proposed target population and documentation to support how the rate was developed. Include in your plan for tracking participant outcomes the project's capacity to collect and report data, including post-program employment outcomes and recidivism data. There are several priority considerations for this grant. The first deals with applying evidence-based practices identified in the What Works in Job Training, the document that was released by the Departments of Labor, Commerce, Education, and Health and Human Services. The second is to utilize the job-driven checklist released by the White House. Links to both of these documents are listed on this slide. The third consideration is to include reentry career planning as a component of post-release activities. This case planning would focus on job placement and employment and job retention support. Further priority considerations include demonstrating a formal partnership with employers in in-demand sectors, local workforce investment boards, and/or external employment assistance programs. Additional partnerships that can bolster an application include partnering with local education institutions that may provide instructors, accredited programming, and/or a direct path to continuing education through which participants could receive industry-recognized certificates. Additional employer engagement, where the program demonstrates providing training employers to work with program participants, is another priority consideration. And lastly, demonstrating effective leveraging of resources to support and/or sustain the proposed project in addition to or without federal funds is also a consideration. The target population for this grant is any specific subset of a population that meets the following characteristics. They're moderate to high risk, as identified by a validated risk assessment, adults or juveniles that are incarcerated 6 to 36 months remaining before their release. They're adults who have been convicted and/or juveniles who have been educated. Here you'll see the various allowable uses for funds. Funds may be used to support participants in ultimately reaching the goal of being employed in a technology-based job. This includes using job readiness assessments, occupational training, apprenticeship programs, career counseling, basic skill training, including ESL, job search and placement support, and resources for civil legal aid. Resources for civil legal aid may include securing a driver's license, expunging criminal records, litigating inappropriate denials of housing or employment, and other services. Please visit the link on this slide for more information for civil legal aid. There's also additional allowable uses for funds to include appropriate equipment and supplies, paying for instructors, managing mentors, post-release services for up to 12 months, data management, and cognitive behavioral therapy. This slide shows how each portion of your application will be weighted for selection criteria. The use for the Statement of the Problem section describes the challenges of providing technology-based career training to individuals returning from incarceration. You should include an assessment of the local demand for trained employees in the sectors you are targeted and the jurisdiction to be served, including the facility where programming is proposed to take place. You should summarize any relevant outcomes from existing job training initiatives and describe the needs required to successfully execute the program. The project design and implementation section is also where you will identify the goals and objectives for the program. The process for screening, assessing, and referring potential participants, and where you should highlight the incorporation of any evidence-based practices. Also, in this section, you will detail your planned adherence to the mandatory requirements and the activities that will fall under the allowable uses. Also, in the project design and implementation, you will discuss the curriculum that will be used and all other activities that support the employability of the program's participants. In the capabilities and competencies section, it will mostly review the information about your organization's capacity and its culture, the management structure, and the staffing plan for the proposed project. You'll also identify any agencies partnering with you on this project. When discussing partner agencies, you need to demonstrate the ability of the partners to provide the resources and expertise needed to support the project and the evidence of the partnership. Data is very important for these programs. This section requires you to describe your plan for measuring, documenting, and evaluating program data. This includes tracking recidivism, how data will be obtained, and how the effectiveness of the program will be assessed. Also include in this section your plan for continuing the project after the Second Chance Act award period has ended. The budget. Be sure to include in your budget how much will be allocated for research and data collection, and set aside funds to send 3 staff members to 3 DOJ-sponsored meetings in Washington, D.C. Remember, there is no match for this grant, but if an application proposes a voluntary match and receives the award, the match will become mandatory. There's also some required attachments for the application, which include the project timeline, position descriptions, letters of support, MOUs or MOAs, but please see pages 18 through 21 for a complete list of attachments that are required. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Roneen to review some important contacts and resources.
Thank you, Darla. One note I'd like to make is, in addition to reviewing those pages that Darla just mentioned, it's important to review that whole solicitation. We're doing a review of it here on this webinar, but before applying, please make sure you review that thoroughly so you're not missing any of the requirements. If you need technical assistance with submitting the application, please contact the grants.gov customer support hotline, which is provided here. The phone line and email are available 24/7. Those are 1-800-518-4726. Again, that's 1-800-518-4726. Or you can email them at support@grants.gov. If you need assistance with any other requirements of the solicitation, please contact the National Criminal Justice Reference Service Response Center. Their hours of operations are listed on this slide, and they can be reached at 1-800-851-3420. Again, that's 1-800-851-3420, or by email at grants@ncjrs.gov. We wanted to provide some resources that are worth checking out as you're thinking through your application. The Integrated Reentry and Employment Strategies White Paper was released by the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the National Reentry Resource Center to present a model for supporting those returning from incarceration find employment. The Ready to Work and What Works in Job Training are 2 documents that were mentioned earlier in the webinar and are included in the solicitation as well. For programs serving youth or young adults, we encourage you to review the Reducing Recidivism and Improving Outcomes for Youth in the Juvenile Justice System. It discusses the unique nature of serving youth and some special considerations when developing programs for that population. Even if you're serving 18 to 24-year-olds, I'd strongly encourage reviewing this document. The Mentoring Ex-Prisoners Guide was developed through a Department of Labor grant and is used widely as a reference for programs doing work with reentry mentoring. If you're looking for more information on evidence-based practices, please visit the sites listed on this slide. They include the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices run through the Department of Health and Human Services, the Office of Justice Programs crimesolutions.gov, and the What Works in Reentry Clearinghouse. Each has significant resources to point towards different types of programs and services that have been found to be effective and or are certified as evidence-based. On this slide, you'll see contact information for myself and Darla, and we'll go ahead and open the webinar up for questions. As we mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar, there is a chat box or a Q&A box at the bottom right-hand of your screen. If you have any questions, please submit those through that chat box. And we do have one question that did come in earlier. The question was, does the grant require a partnership with a training entity if we are the training entity? So if the agency that's applying is the training entity. I don't believe so. I believe that if you have the certification to provide that training yourself, then that will suffice, but I'll also turn that over to Darla to see if there's any other information around that.
I concur, Ronin, that's correct.
Okay, great. So if you're applying for this grant and your agency is certified or accredited, depending on what type of agency you are, to provide this type of training, then that will count or suffice for partnering with a training entity. Okay. Would training activities include internship placement? So if I'm reading that question correctly, you're asking if placing someone in an internship would count for the actual training. I believe you need to have an actual training curriculum in the particular field, and I do believe an internship can count towards that. But beyond that, Darla, do you have anything else, any other context around whether an internship placement would count as a training activity?
Ronin, the training should be taking place pre-release for the individual.
Okay, we actually just got some context on that question. So the question wasn't about whether the internship would be the training, would replace the training, but could funds be used for internship placement? And I believe they can, because I know that apprenticeship is something that is included under allowable uses. Do I have that correct, Darla?
I concur with you.
Okay, great. All right. Next question, is a community college eligible to be the fiscal agent? I know that for educational institutions, if you are applying for the grant, you must be considered a local, an entity of local government. So if in your jurisdiction you are considered part of the government, whether it's through the city, county, or state, then you would be eligible to apply. But if you are a private educational institution, then I do not believe you'd be eligible to apply. Next question was, did you say you wanted a curriculum submitted, and would that be as an appendix? I don't believe the full curriculum would necessarily need to be submitted, but what the name of that curriculum is, what where it comes from, what type of curriculum I believe would need to be included. Darla, anything else for that particular question about attaching a curriculum to the application?
It just needs to be easily identified with the labeling. for the PDF.
Okay, great. All right, next question. Does the grant require the entirety of the tech-based training to occur in the incarceration facility? Can the training begin pre-release and continue post-release? The training is required pre-release. It can continue post-release, and I actually believe that one of the priority considerations is if you yourself are not an educational institution and you partner with an educational institution, if the if the pre-release training could be continued on the outside, then that's a benefit if they're able to continue that training as they go on to as they return to their community. Someone asked if current grant recipients are eligible, and they are eligible. If you already received any kind of Second Chance Act grant before, or if you currently have a Second Chance Act grant, you're still eligible to apply. All right, someone asked if inmate participants cannot be released to leave the prison during the training, can, quote, real-world experience be in the form of real-world like training projects? So definitely they don't need to be, the training and the quote real-world experience doesn't have to be on the outside if there is an opportunity inside the institution to do the work that they're training for. Some past programs have had work projects as part of the programming that already happens in the facility. But beyond that, if there's any other part of that question I'm missing here, just please go ahead and submit that in the Q&A box. But in terms of being released while they're incarcerated to go do outside projects, they don't have to do that. All right, let's see here. Someone asked, can you elaborate on certified to provide this kind of training? So it really depends on the type of training that your program is proposing. So if it's a training that in order to be able to work within that field that they would need some kind of accreditation or certification, then the training entity should be able to provide that. Also think about the type of job that someone is training, that your training is prepping them for. If just having the training won't be enough to get the job, if employers want someone who has a particular certificate or a degree, for instance, in the particular area, these should be factors that you consider when picking who would be your training partner. If it's, yeah, I think that mostly covers it. So if you are training them in something where they may not need the certification, then you just want to make sure that the people who are training them in whatever field or whatever vocation it is, that they have sufficient training, and then that can be provided to BJA. So you're showing that your instructors are either trained teachers in this, that they've gone through a training in this particular area, that they have a certification in this area, but it really varies based on the specific type of training. Next question was, can funds be used for a paid internship, or is that considered client stipends? If it's an internship, I think it does fit. It could possibly fit under that apprenticeship category, but let me refer over to Darla if there's any kind of distinctions there that we need to be aware of.
It needs to be distinguished that you're not paying the recipients from the federal money.
Oh, okay, good point. So it's that you're not actually paying the recipient to do the job. It's you could be paying for the training, but not actually paying them a salary for the job. Is that correct, Darla?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right. So someone asked, if we are a state corrections agency and obtain certified training for our vocational instructors and they become certified, do we need an outside training entity to come into the system? And this particular corrections agency, they train and certify their own staff. So I know that you can hire your own staff to do this work. I believe to meet the partnering with a training entity requirement, you need to show who was the organization or entity that provided the training to your staff. But again, let me refer over to Darla to see if I got that correct or if there's any other nuances to that.
No, you're correct. They would just need to provide who trained their staff, and as long as their staff has a certification, then they can conduct the course or the class.
Great, thank you. Next question, if a current grant applicant is current program taken into consideration as part of the selection criteria, or is the new application a total standalone in regards to selection? So I think this might be a question for you, Darla. If they currently have either a Second Chance Act grant or maybe a Second Chance Act technology training grant, is that program going to be taken into consideration when making the selection, or is it considered a completely standalone application?
It's a completely standalone application.
Okay, great. The next question was, does building skills and construction program qualify as technology? I think you'd need to, I would need more information to be able to answer that question. So there's definitely construction training programs that would qualify as technology, especially there's a past grant recipient who is doing construction training individuals on construction machinery. So this would be like the vehicles that you use in construction, learning how to operate those and use those in construction. So that qualified as technology. But like I said, it would just depend on what specifically you're training them on when it comes to construction. So the next question is about the mentoring component. The grant does not specify that mentoring is a requirement of post-release support follow-up. Is this correct that mentorship is not required as long as there are other evidence-based supports offered during the follow-up? That is correct. Mentoring is one of the allowable uses for the funds if you chose to include mentoring in your program, but it is not a requirement of the grant. And then I have a more logistical question, I think, for this application. Within the proposal text, can the type size of tables be smaller than 12 points? Can the text in the tables be single-spaced? So I'll refer over to Darla on that one.
No, it cannot. Sorry.
Okay, so the size of tables cannot be smaller than 12 points, and the text cannot be single-spaced. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, just making sure. All right, thank you. All right, there was a link to the solicitation, but it isn't downloading. Will this be fixed? If you're asking for the link just to the PDF document of the solicitation, we should have that on our website, the NRRC website. And if you are not able to access it there, it should be fixed. We'll look into it for you, but we'll be sure to include it when we release the webinar and the recording of this webinar and the slides. We'll make sure to have a working link in there, but we'll follow up to make sure that that's working. All right. Checking if there's any other questions here. So we still have a fair amount of time in case anyone does have more questions. I don't have any on deck at the moment, but if you have any other questions regarding the application process or specifics of the actual grant program and what you can or can't propose, what you can or can't use funds for, anything like that, please feel free to submit those in the chat box. Or if Darla and I weren't able to answer one of your questions fully, feel free to add some more context, and we'll try and get you a better answer. And we'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and give a few minutes for that. So if you do have any other questions, feel free to submit those. Okay, we got another question about submitting the logistics of submitting the application. They're asking if they can use a diagram. And I'm not sure in what part of the application that would be. I know that people have submitted organizational charts as part of their application and flow charts, logic models. So they gave a little bit of context here. It might show course and career pathways. So I think that could be included as long as there is text to explain it and contextualize it. Darla, any thoughts on using a diagram in the application?
That's okay, as long as there is some text to explain what it is.
For someone who was having trouble accessing the solicitation, I just checked on the website and was able to pull it up. So I'm going to send a link to, put a link to it that I'll send to all participants. I just sent it. If you're having any difficulty accessing the solicitation from that link, just please let us know. All right, so we'll go ahead and give it another minute here if anyone has any last-minute questions that they wanted to ask. Oh, and just as a reminder, when we release the recording of the webinar, we'll also release a PDF of the slides being used. So you will be able to access the links and the phone numbers and the email addresses that we talked about on this webinar. Okay, looks like we're wrapped up on the question and answer section. Although if you do think of any other questions or issues that you might be having with the solicitation, feel free to reach out. Like I said, we provided our contact information on this slide, but if you are having issues with the actual application and submission process, please go to that grants.gov contact hotline, help hotline, and that will be provided in the slide. So thank you everyone for joining us. This will conclude the webinar. We will be emailing a link to the recording of this presentation as well as a link to a PDF of the PowerPoint slides used in the presentation in the coming weeks. These links will also be made available on the National Reentry Resource Center's website, which again is csgjusticecenter.org/NRRC. I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter as well. The link is now on the slide that's currently up. Thank you again for joining us, and good luck with your application.